Hello, Sarah. I am so happy to have you here. I'm first going to introduce you. So Sarah Grace is an intuitive paramedic. Well, was an intuitive paramedic in the 911 system for 18 years, 13. 15 total, 15 years, and now has a private practice blending Western and energy medicine together. And we'll get a little bit more into what that means because I think everybody will be really interested. But I wanted to just give you a little introduction into who you are and what you're doing now.
Thank you. I just love you.
Yeah, I love you too. Yay. So I really would love to start this, and we'll also get into her book that she wrote. I'll just introduce that right now, and then we'll get more into it later. It's called Journey into Grace. It's such a fun and for me personally, and I just want to say this, I've known you for a while now, and it was totally enlightening for me. I felt like I was reading the book and I was like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen and what's next? And at the same time, I had this like really deep love and compassion for you because it's not anything that I really knew about you. I mean, I knew little pieces, but not the full story. So I just wanted to say that. And when I got done with it, I was like, oh, I have to talk to her. I need to talk to her. So here we are.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I'd like to start out, but just telling your story and like how you kind of got to where you are now.
Okay. Well, I was born and raised in a very small town in South Dakota, and this is pre-internet. And so there wasn't a lot of access to outside world or stimulation. And it was a relatively normal upbringing until I was 7. And then one day I just woke up and could perceive energies in the way of auras. It started with being able to see aura colors around people and sense people's feelings, hear people's thoughts, and then, other different variances of energetics in the way of ley lines and, just energy, seeing energy. I was overstimulated with it, didn't know what to do with it. And when I started to talk with my family, I was quickly silenced and kind of told, no, that's not acceptable. It didn't fit into the paradigm of our upbringing at that time. And so then I essentially kind of developed a sense of toxic shame, or kind of like, oh crap, what's wrong with me? Why am I like this? Why is anybody else like this? Like seeing spirits at nighttime and just hearing different voices and tones and things. And so I developed a lot of fear. And I just stuffed it down, and I tried really hard to just be a normal person. And essentially what I did to make myself feel better was a lot of overachieving initially through the school years as an athlete in academics and that type of thing. But then over time, my family situation was relatively turbulent and violent. And after my mom passed away, I kind of just, everything crumbled around me, and I kind of went off the rails in searching for myself. Didn't have that sense of like self-assuredness or safety or a sense of self-love at all. And so I kind of tumbled around, and all of that is documented in the book at length, which is what Shauna was referencing earlier. And my intuition over time was kind of nudging me towards becoming a paramedic, but I was very, very frightened of it because I was kind of like, man, I don't know anything about medical stuff. I could kill somebody. This is a big deal. And I didn't realize at the time that you don't start out running advanced level calls. You start at the basics and kind of work your way up. So after enough kind of hard knocks in life, I finally was like, all right, I got nothing else going. I'm going to listen to my intuition. And so I went to UCLA, actually the EMT program down there, and started working on the ambulance in South Central LA. Greater Compton, Inglewood is where I first started. And over time, I mean, that was an extreme situation anyway, as you can imagine, just trying to learn. It's like throwing myself in the deep end and then having to figure out how to swim, which is kind of how I tend to work and thrive, is what I've noticed about myself. But it was a really it was a really good learning experience just in the way of EMS. And then over time, what ended up happening was the energy, the way that I perceive, just began to kind of flood through me on 911 calls. And it was nothing that I was trying to make happen. If anything, I was still very repressed about the visuals and about my capacities. And I still didn't want anybody to know this part of myself. And so I quieted it. But over time, like I became that paramedic who was always there the last 10 to 15 minutes of life. And so really watched a lot of people transition from being in body until the soul, like watching the chakras release and the soul go out the crown. And then I could see the loved ones, you know, who had passed coming in to greet the soul and or celestials or whatever the circumstance was. And over enough time, like I still really fought it and really didn't want to say anything. But after enough experiences like that, I really had to just stop and say, what is this? Like, why am I like this? Clearly, it's not bad as I had been told when I was young. There's, you know, essentially then I decided that if I was going to open to this, because, you know, the stimulus essentially is the way that I have been since I was 7. It's a pretty consistent all day, every day experience for me. So coming to acceptance and coming to self-exploration with that meant really looking at everything that I had been told was wrong with me and was wrong with the way that I perceived. And so looking at my shadow was a big thing, and kind of uncovering a lot of the things, the toxic behaviors that I had done to myself as a way of coping with this. Really began the process of me coming to terms with my abilities. And then I said, okay, I honestly, Shauna, had, I'll just fully own this, a total judgment towards psychic, like all things psychic. It didn't resonate with me. I had a lot of judgment that psychics are ungrounded and they don't make any sense. And what are they saying? And I didn't feel that I could relate. And so that was another part of me that was really not wanting to come out because I didn't feel that I belonged in that realm either. That was big, really big for me. And part of me was really resistant in that way. But then as this kind of continued to unfold and it increased in intensity, it increased in duration and frequency on the 911 calls, I just got more and more and more opportunities to be in that space. And it felt so loving, right? It felt so nurturing. To me, it became almost like midwifing into the next realm. And to me, it was a very gentle and actually beautiful process that I was honored to witness. And so when I finally surrendered to the universe and said, okay, this is how I am, I want it to be on my terms, right? Just meaning that I would like it to be grounded and grounded and practical. And so in ways that we can really take these higher level concepts of energetic understanding and awareness and understanding of like the psychic tools and intuition and clairvoyance, clairaudience. How can we take that and make it grounded in this reality in a way that can really help people show up here? Yes. And so that was kind of my deal with the universe, if you would. Okay, I'll do this, but
but I'm not going to do it while I'm floating.
Yeah, I'm not gonna be like, I'm just not really the woo-woo kind, and like more power to those guys, you know, if that's what works for them and it's authentic for them. But for me, I just have that linear, tangible paramedic mindset where it's got to land here, right? Otherwise, like, what's the point? And so I started by becoming educated on Reiki, and then I went into mediumship and different programs and exploration. Many, many years of shamanic lineage came through various branches and studies, and then medical intuition. As I started opening to these different modalities, I was intuitively led because essentially a lot of us have access to different screens or inputs of information, right? And so some people see, like I see a lot, and then I feel very deeply. And then some people hear, some people know, some people, you know, there's a lot of different ways. And so I didn't know which modality necessarily would be right for me. So what I did was I started with Reiki because it seemed the most accessible. And from there, my intuition led me into the next level, and then the next level, and the next level. And all of this, during this time, I was still working on the streets as a paramedic and intuitively being led to start doing, I did in total about 50 or 60 free sessions. It was about a year and a half long in self-imposed internship where I just had friends and family lay down and I was just put my hands on them because that's what I was being guided to do. And over time, with the education coupled with the Western medical background and kind of the knowingness of anatomy, physiology, and, you know, structure and things, what I've kind of morphed and stepped into now is what was created over time.
Okay.
Hey.
Hey. Oh my God. I love, there was so much that I wanted to say as you were talking. I was like, well, what about this? And tell me.
I'm sorry, stop me anytime. I just
no. I have lots of questions, so it's fine. I want to hear it all. So tell me now, because one of the things I think that I find when, like, so for me, like, I've been around a lot of psychics probably for a lot of my life. Like, I'm kind of drawn to them. Like, I like them. I'm like, but I'm definitely particular about who. So it's not like I just open myself up to all of them, but I have had a lot of them in my life. And I realized that I call that in. And I also have similar to you, that when, like, I also have an aversion to it in some ways too. Like, I'm a little bit like almost like, I don't know about you, you know, like, I don't know about that. And it's been better as I've gotten older, but I've definitely had that kind of just aversion a little bit. And I think a lot of people do. I think a lot of people feel like a little bit scared, you know, and I think part of the fear comes from people not knowing what the psychic might say to them. Like, it's going to be bad, or they're going to tell them something that's bad. And so what I'd love to hear from you is what you do in a session. And if someone was to come to you now, what that would look like overall.
Okay, great question. And yes, there's much that we can touch on about what you just mentioned that I feel is really important, especially at this day and age and kind of where we are. When somebody comes to me for a session, currently the typical regime, if you will, right now is kind of a half hands-on treatment and then a half reading or kind of a dialogue. My personal take is that we are all our own greatest teachers and healers, and that just sometimes we forget or get kind of lost in there. So it's not that I'm healing anybody, but I have the ability to see energy and information that maybe they can't see themselves. And so when I'm kind of the mirror and just am able to kind of hold up the roadmap while handing them tools and homework for personal empowerment and growth that they can take into their life, that's really how I've kind of formulated my modality. So usually it's about 30 to 40 minutes of hands-on where we'll do, I never know what it's going to be with with each individual. Some people have disease process, so that's more of a medical intuitive, right? And most everyone gets a grounding and a clearing, like energetic reset through the auric infrastructure, the bilateral hemispheres, the physical, mental, and emotional infrastructures. And that's just kind of the standard base. But then we usually go much, much more in depth. Some people are looking for help with their intuitive gifts and kind of the stimulus that they're perceiving. So then we'll work with them in those ways. Some people are grieving a loved one that's passed and are wanting to have a connection made, you know, that may not happen in a session. Again, I like it still because it's like being a paramedic. I never have any idea what's going to happen, you know?
Right, totally.
Which I love, you know? But most oftentimes, and this is when it's a hands-on, I do work with people internationally, and it's, you know, via phone, via Skype. That's a little bit different, where we'll just connect to them and obviously have the conversation. But the in-person is the hands-on plus the reading, where I give them the tool.
Okay. And, you know, I think what's interesting too, and what I feel from you, and I think it's interesting to bring up, is that when I have a session with you, I never feel like you're giving me more than I can actually take on or handle. Right. So I feel like I see the mirror that you're talking about, because it's as though like it's just the information that I need right now for this moment that we're working together. And I think the fear sometimes is like that people are going to be told like the future, you know, because I think that's been kind of in the past, some of the ways that we've in the, let's say, media, how we've seen psychics is like, oh, they're going to tell us the future, and they're going to tell us how many kids we're going to have, and how many we're going to get married, and when we're going to get married, and like these kind of things. Right. And,
1-800 psychic lines.
Yes, 1-800 psychic
Right.
lines, exactly. Yeah. And so what I love is that, you know, this is about the moment that we meet together, and whatever's happening for me in that moment is the information that I'm receiving. Is that true?
Yes, absolutely. And I love that you're saying that again. So looking at psychics specifically and the societal stigma associated, a lot of people, myself included, initially had that preconceived notion of it's kind of charlatan, if you will, or fringy, you know, kind of out there stuff with the 1-800 psychic lines, or the crystal ball, the black cat, beaded curtain. That's kind of what people think.
Right.
And so essentially psychic, we can look at psychic as a term as kind of a blanket umbrella, if you will. The word psychic can encompass intuitive as well. So intuitive is going to be, you know, coming in with the clairs, clairsentient, clairaudient, clairvoyant, you know, and all of those. And then empathic is where we're feeling everything very deeply, but actually taking people's stuff on without knowing, right? So it's if we just think of the word psychic as kind of the blanket umbrella, and then start to kind of specify like the different brackets underneath, then number one, I think it dispels a little bit of the fear around the word psychic, right? And number two, we can start to become empowered by figuring out like, how do we perceive the information? Regarding to thinking of the future, I don't fortune tell. That's not what I do. The people who do that kind of stuff, great. If it works for them, awesome. Again, I go back to, we are all our own creators and manifestors. And so I really like to hand the ball back to the person and really look at where are they giving their power away. Because to me, to go to somebody to tell me how my life is going to go is giving my power to somebody else. And I'm not interested in doing that.
Yes.
Nor am I interested in having that type of client exchange in my practice. That's just not for me. And because again, I really think we all have it within us, just sometimes we get lost or stuck and we can't see it. So when it comes to handing people as much as they need, when I first started doing this, I got a little egoically involved, and I was excited, and I was like, oh, I want to do a great job. And, you know, and so I would kind of blast people, often with a little bit more than they perhaps could have handled. And then what I saw over time was, number one, my ego got checked by spirit, because that's how spirit rolls, right? And number two, I was looking at it then as being a paramedic, right? If I overtreat as a paramedic, I'm liable in a lot of different ways. And so I just reined it in and made it, I humbled myself quite a bit, and it was like, this has nothing to do with me per se. I'm the conduit. And if I go in and the energy is too much, and I hand somebody too much, and they go into the parking lot and have an anxiety attack, then we actually did the opposite of the intention.
Yes.
So anymore, I'm much more mindful about, number one, keeping my ego out of it. Number two, meeting the person where they are and finding a way for them to, it's my responsibility as the provider, I feel, to be able to give the information in a way that they can hear, that they can receive, and then ultimately letting it go, because whether they take it or whether they don't is on them. That's not on me.
No, it's not your job. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's kind of hard to do, even if you're not working in the same way you are working, but like in any way where we're in a place where we are giving information for the other person, for healing, for growth, in this kind of more like in my own self and my own work as a coach and as a teacher, a yoga teacher, I feel like sometimes I have that, where it comes in that responsibility, where I feel like I'm responsible to heal them or make them better or move them forward or get them through whatever they're going on or help their body heal or, those kind of things. And I love that, a lot of your work has been in your own personal self to go like, no, my job is to give the information, and that's it. I give it and it's received however it's received. And I wonder, when you said that you like ego checked yourself, that the ego is popping in?
Yeah.
Like what happened? Like, how did you do that? What was your tools for doing that?
Well, essentially, I think for the most part, most healers or people who are empathic or feel called to help, right? And there's so many. This is what I've learned, Shauna, that's really, really exciting. And this is why I love that we're having this conversation right now, because there's literally millions of us, right?
Yes.
People who are energetically sensitive and wanting to contribute, wanting to do something
Totally.
helps humanity as a collective, right? Or the planet or animals, like everybody's
Right.
got their
Or
thing.
nature or whatever.
Or
Yeah.
nature, right, right. And so figuring out what feels best for the individual is great. And then it's this kind of a fine line where we get in, and if like we'll start doing it, and it can feel really good, right? Because for me, I spent 25 years in the closet doing everything possible not to come to terms with this.
Right.
And when I finally came to terms with it, I finally felt like I was breathing, right? And then I started to see that kind of my abilities, right? In the way of like, oh, wow, I can actually do some things here in the way that people are really hearing and receiving. And there is where it's kind of a fine line, because we can watch ourselves. We can either kind of start to drink our own Kool-Aid, so to speak. And unfortunately, I see that quite often in a lot of the spiritual communities still. And that's, it is what it is. This is where we're at.
Right.
And for myself, no particular instance is coming to mind, other than I like to have people in my life who will hold me 100% accountable and tell me when I'm being a little egoic or if I'm being a little too big for my britches. And so that came in early, a couple of different times. And then, oh, you know what? There was one time that's just now coming in where I have really intense visuals. Like oftentimes I can see to like it's almost like high definition, full resolution television in front of me. And sometimes the visuals that I see are really unsettling, especially if somebody was traumatized and I witness the trauma as we're releasing it or from their body. But when I was egoically invested, I remember watching a woman who was gang raped when she was really young. And it was so jarring for my body, and I was so in it, and I was so wanting to do a good job that I actually assumed a lot of that energy. And it took me weeks. I got so sick, like physically sick, and I was just a mess. And I had to go to one or two other providers at that time to kind of help me get out of it. So if my ego had not been involved, I would know, and this is kind of how I am now. It's like no matter what I'm seeing, it just is what it is, and I don't take it in me. Does that make sense?
Totally.
It's a matter of not putting yourself in it, not becoming identified with, but really just saying, okay, this is what is right now.
This is what is. Yeah. That is, I think it's such an important conversation for empaths, because you spoke to this earlier about, people who feel a lot and then take it on as they don't know how to separate from that's theirs and not mine. And I think that right there, I think is a really good way of looking at it. Like if you're feeling it, whether you're feeling it, hearing it, seeing it, knowing it, it's just in front of you, and it's not like you're getting in it, like you kind of like, I imagined you getting in the TV or like the screen and becoming a part of it rather than watching it as it's just like, I'm just watching this happening and that's all that I'm doing. And I'm holding space for it to happen, but I'm not getting in the TV and becoming the actor in the play.
Exactly. And I really have found over time that again, going back to, I think we start with the best of intentions. There's a lot of people that really want to do a good job and help. And same time, when we start to like identify with I'm a healer or I am this, then we are more prone to sliding ourselves into situations like that. So just being more mindful of having a well-rounded life, right? I don't identify myself as a healer, right? I mean, I work with energy. I work with really, really large currents of energy and have for a long time, but I don't identify myself with that. I mean, I'm a mother, I'm a friend, I'm a daughter, I'm a partner, I'm all of these things, an athlete, a paramedic, all of these things. A runner, a yogi.
Yeah, exactly.
All that stuff. So just being mindful that we're not trying to create a sense of identity, right, for ourselves to really feel powerful in that way. like that can get us so far. I mean, there's, it does happen. It can get us so far, but ultimately what I found is that I kind of got knocked down. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, so one of the things I wanted to also ask you, and you spoke of this when you introduced yourself and told your story, but I also recognized it in the book, particularly as what I found so fast. One of the things I found fascinating was that each experience that you witnessed of death was so incredibly different.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I just thought that that was so neat because it showed me that each of our experiences as a human is so different. And I think one of the things I believe so deeply is that like when we don't accept ourselves, it separates one another, it separates each of us. And when we begin to accept ourselves, we begin to accept other people. And we don't see our differences as being a bad thing, but actually as a good thing. And what I saw was that same feeling, like what it did for me is really validated that belief that I had, because if that's happening during death, because I think sometimes we think everything, it's all the same. Everybody dies and it's exactly the same,
Yeah.
And so I wonder, like, if you could, just speak to that, like, since seeing so many death experiences and being so different, how does that for you, how do you relate that to the human experience and what that means?
I love your questions.
Oh, yay.
That's a good question. I was really intrigued by exactly what you're saying, because initially, I think a lot of us may grow up with some sort of religious, upbringing or some sort of semblance of the way that it is. And so we may think that death is a certain thing or a certain way. And that's okay, those belief structures. So when I saw that everything was actually quite different, that rocked my belief structures and continued to allow me to open. So what I saw in the way of traumatic death, a lot of times when it was like, in your body, out of your body, there was a lot of pause in between the moment of actual transition where maybe the soul was waiting on scene with us and kind of like, shaking their head or wanting to come back into their body, not understanding, and oftentimes with them, I would see a lot of celestial presences come in, more of the angelic kind of frequency, just a very soft, gentle, accepting type of frequency. So that was a lot with the traumatic death. Okay. And with more of the hospice, long-term kind of anticipated death or like the chronic disease process, I would often see a lot of loved ones and families and other, pets that had passed and stuff like that coming in. And so I thought that was quite interesting and something that I just kind of, tuck was like a feather in my cap. Was, no, that's really interesting to notice. Yeah. And pertaining to death itself, to me, I look at, initially I started out as a paramedic, kind of afraid of death and having that concept of fear around death. And now after seeing hundreds and hundreds of deaths, and now what I see it as a totally different thing. I look at death as almost like a graduation. Right. It's a celebration, because as I was looking at the person who's taking their last breath and they have fear in their eyes, right? And they're just like, oh my God, this is happening, trying to get their brain around it. And I would watch the energy begin to release, and I would watch as their eyes, and they took their last breath and their eyes, their pupils would fix and dilate. And right before their pupils fixed and dilated, I saw them see it, right? And it meaning, right, whatever the loved ones, whatever the celestials, whatever the next level for them is. And so it was always, right, in that way, when I was looking into the eyes, very peaceful, where they were like excited, or not necessarily excited, but they got it. And so that was very, very interesting. And so the way I look at death now is more of a celebration, a graduation ceremony, if you will. And I really pay more attention to the people who are not alive, but they're still in their bodies. Right? There's a whole lot of people that are just dead in their bodies. And so what I like to do, because I've seen so much death, people who are just existing, and they're not just, they're just not going for it, and they're just buried in whatever their stuff is, right? And so kind of my specialty now, and I just like to remember that all of us are going to die. We never know when it's going to be. So how about live, right? not only live, let's thrive. Let's have an amazing time. Like, let's do everything we wanted to do. Let's live it, you know, because it is that there's a million ways to live. There's a lot of different ways to die. Ultimately, it's all energy. Ultimately, we all go back to understanding, right? And so celebrating this life while we have it, really my main focus.
It's so your why. It's like why. It's so your why. Like why you do what you do. You know, that's what it feels like to me when you say that, because I'm like so excited. Like, yes, oh my gosh, yes.
Yes. Well, my main thing, Shauna, honestly, is really not only empowering just the everyday person, but really, really empowering people with high sense perception, right? That we're not victimized. We don't have to live in an overstimulated state. We don't have to take other people's feelings and emotions, and that it is actually okay for us to go out and be fully in our power and speaking about the way that we see the world. That's really my jam.
Totally. Oh my gosh. Okay. So, oh my God, that's so good. Like when you talk about death, I'm so interested, you know, it's like because I actually have a huge interest in death just in general. I've been around a lot of people from the time I was really young that have died and have experienced a lot of funerals because I have a huge family. And so, and my mom would always be like, come on, we're going to a funeral, you know? And I was always like, okay, you know, and she had no fear around that. And neither did I, because I think she didn't, you know? And so I got in and I think that was the choice that I made, is to actually have also that same belief. So when someone talks about death, I get really, really excited, because for me, the more that I'm in acceptance of death, the more I feel like I can live, which is exactly what you were saying. And so, and also the piece of like really experiencing the different like, I think that's really interesting, of the experience of the different kinds of death and what happened after. But all of that, when you were speaking, felt so supportive. Like it felt like they were support in whatever way they needed. It all came and they were supported in that way. And I feel like, you know, the actual experience of death might be scary, you know, like you were saying, like they were scared, you know, and that might be scary, but in actuality, we get the support that we need, and no matter what. And that feels like almost as in a human body, this is what came to me, is like, I'm getting the support that I need right now. I have all the support that I need, even in human existence, because it's shown when I die. Like you were able to see that. Do you feel like that's true?
Oh, totally. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I wanted to speak to that. Okay. So, I do want to talk a little bit about the different psychic abilities that you have in the book, because I found this also really fascinating too, because I never thought like, oh, there's actually different, because you talked about the blanket and then all the stuff that was underneath. And when I read it, I was so excited, because I was like, oh, I don't have that one that much. Like, that's not very strong for me. This one's really strong for me. And it actually validated me, in a way that made me feel like, okay, cool. Like I can feel and have my intuition in my way, and it's fine. Because I've also felt like, well, something's wrong with me and I shouldn't feel so much. And oh my God, you know, and like, so I just wanted to kind of go over the different ones. So the first one that you have in here is Clairvoyant, which is the clear seeing. And so can you just talk a little bit about that one?
Yes. So all of the clairs are essentially clear, and it's a French term, I believe. So clairvoyance is clear seeing, usually coming out of the third eye, the pineal. So when people are like, well, I can kind of see, like when somebody's standing against a dark wall or a white wall, I can kind of see something. I think a lot of people are misunderstanding that I'm not seeing it with my physical eyeballs. What's happening is I'm seeing it. The information for me comes in a screen that's on my left side. And so it may come on your right, may come in front, may come who knows where, right? But it's usually a lot of times it's tracer information, just looking like moving energy aura, like the different colors, and auras are all multiple colors at all times. It's not just one color. I think that's really cute when they're like, what color is my aura? I'm like, all of them.
Yeah, totally.
You know,
Mhm.
I love that. So clear seeing or clairvoyance, we have the capacity to see spirits, you know, whether
Mhm.
they're entities or celestial or whatever. It could be spirits of humans that have passed. It's just seeing.
So it's more like a picture, right? Like is it kind of like the screen that you were talking about? Is it like?
It is, there's nothing really that's stagnant. And so for me, it's like a consistent slideshow of visual imagery that's
Okay.
moving at top of every. So if a person has a movement where they move their hand, there's tracers of,
Okay.
so it's like, those pictures of cars moving at night on the
Yeah.
freeway, it would slow it
Yeah.
down like that. That's behind most everything at all times. And so that's
Okay.
just one thing on top of the auras, on top of the grid structure information, which looks very numerical. There's a lot of sacred geometry, numerology in there. There's a lot of, so everything is different, in the
Yeah.
way.
So even though you see all of it, some people might only see pieces of that too.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Now the clairaudient. So that's the clear hearing piece.
Mm-hmm. And so that's going to come in lodged in, it connects to the physical form in the fifth chakra and the throat chakra, actually. Pay attention. So clairaudience is just going to be clear hearing. And you may hear voices, you may hear sounds, you may hear it sounds like kind of radio frequencies that don't make any sense. Oftentimes it feels like the ears just like pop or have a high-pitched ringing tone to them. That can all kind of fall under that bracket. So what I like to say is pay attention to which side it comes on when you hear something. Pay attention to if it's a male or a female voice, what language they're speaking in, if it's the same voice always, or if it's different voices. There's a lot of different ways to look at that.
Okay.
And I'd like to speak to that in particular because what is in our Western culture, what is the number one thing they say about being crazy is hearing voices.
Hearing
and
voices,
that's actually one of the gifts. And so a lot of people who are clairaudient are like, oh, hell no, I'm not saying anything, right? Because they don't want to come out like that.
Well, when you spoke about, I think it's a good time to say this, when you spoke in your introduction for yourself about how you wanted to push, your, let's say, gifts away and didn't want them to be known, and how you sort of sabotaged your own self or did things, to yourself. Like I wondered when, and I read that about that in the book, obviously you have all that in detail in the book. I wondered if you feel like, in our society, a lot of that is happening for that reason.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, there's tremendous self-sabotage out of fear of high sense perception, fear of our own personal power, right? Of being different. Most everybody just wants to fit in. The ego wants to fit in, right? We want to be okay. We want to be safe. That's what the ego wants. And to have a semblance of control. And oftentimes this having the high sense perception, there's no control over that, right? I don't control when I see what I see, when the information comes, when it doesn't come. I don't control that. And so that can be a lot to live with, especially when you're not okay with it on your own, right? Mm-hmm. So the self-sabotage and medicating in a lot of different ways is kind of the standard go-to right now for people with high sense perception.
And do you feel like it makes it go away? Like, does it stop it from happening? Or do you think it still happens, but like you're numb to it? Like what happens when you actually take...
I think it's like throwing blankets over the top of it. I've heard of some people saying that their gifts have totally gone away and that they couldn't get them back. Mine never really went away, and I did a lot of really crazy things to try to make it stop. It died, like a lot. It died down quite a bit, but it was still there. And I still just kind of always had this knowing or this visual. The visuals have never really stopped for me. And so I think that it can just really blanket it down, but that it's still actually there.
Okay, cool. All right. So the next one is clear. I don't know how to say this. This is the clear feeling one.
Yes.
What is it?
Clairsentience.
Clairsentience. Okay.
And so a lot of people kind of are synonymous with empath with this one. And so I think the delineation between the two is really going to be, do we just feel things, or do we feel things and take them on as our own? So with the clairsentient, we can just feel things, right? Where the claircognizant, we'll probably get to in a second, that's clear knowing. You just know things, right? I just know that I don't like that person, or I just know that person is awesome. That kind of something, that we're not taking it into us as an empath. And I would say now that I've worked with, I've had thousands of clients and hundreds of energetic sessions and clients now at this point. And the most of what I'm seeing more than anything is empath, right? The people who feel things very deeply and take it on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say upwards of like 75 to 80% of the people that are coming to me are working with empath as their base. And then a lot of them have gifts on top of that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. I want to get back to that. I want to do the claircognizant is the clear knowing. So tell us about that one.
It's kind of the same thing. It's like, you just know, like, it's not coming from your brain. And this is the thing, just like my visions don't come from my eyeballs.
Right.
My phone doesn't come from my brain. Right.
Yeah.
It comes from a space just outside of it. And it's like, so you're having a stream, right? Because most of us have monkey minds that just never shut up. And so you're having a stream of thought of whatever you're thinking about, right? Like what you want on your sandwich. And that's what you're thinking about. And all of a sudden, from out of nowhere comes this like, oh, I just know this. Well, that's claircognizance, because it's not in the flow of your mental linear construct. It's coming from a space outside of that.
Okay. Got it. Okay. And then back to the empath. And I do feel like this is an important conversation, because I do feel like a lot of people have this ability to feel and then take on. I wonder from you, what is the one tool that you feel like you would tell those out there that feel that and take it on and are like a little bit feeling like a little bit like, what's happening to me? Why am I, sort of that? What tool could you give them to so that they could separate the feeling and taking on?
Woo, that's a big question.
There's probably many, but and it's probably personal to the person too. Yeah. I imagine, coming from you, but I'm just wondering if there's like some.
Well, essentially, first of all, figuring out, just asking, like, if so, say kind of the same thing. All of a sudden, you're walking down the street or you're shopping, right? So say we're shopping. Okay. And we're using our spinach, and we got our little shopping cart. We're actually having a pretty good day, and we're going along, and all of a sudden we look over and we meet eyes, or you don't even have to meet eyes with this person who just is like, all of a sudden you just feel really angry, right? And it just comes out of nowhere, and suddenly you're like super pissed, and you're like, well, what the hell, man? I was just like doing good with my turnips and my spinach, and like everything was all right. So what likely transpired was like kind of a crossover conversion there, where you took on that person's energy. Now, number one, just understand that this is there's nothing wrong with you for this, right?
That's good.
And number two, have the understanding and awareness that we can either feel victimized by it, or we can choose personal empowerment. And this is where I'm going to be teaching at length as I go forward, is the personal accountability piece can really make or break like how we thrive with this or don't, right? Because we can literally, this can take us down, right? If we just feel all of this stuff all the time, it just feels really crappy all the time. So the first thing is, when you have that awareness where you were feeling good and then all of a sudden you're not, stop and just ask, is this mine? Just ask your body, or if you're feeling it in your body, or if you're suddenly just, is this mine? And you'll likely get a voice or a knowing or a feeling like, no, it's not. And so, or yes, maybe it is, but if that's a different thing. So if it's not, then all you have to do is say, return to sender with consciousness, or return to sender with love. So essentially what you're doing is you're just taking the information and giving it back to them. And that way you can work on keeping yourself relatively clear.
Okay, cool. That was
all day, every day.
That was a good one. That was a good one, because that's pretty easy, I think, because we have talked a little bit about more, other tools. I'm not gonna say more or less, but other tools that I have been working with that have been really interesting and cool. And actually, I want to mention one of them, because why not? One of the tools you gave me last time was to to feel, to expand my my energy, because my energy, or my aura, I guess you say, lives kind of close, and to expand it out and to let it go as far as I'm comfortable. When I get uncomfortable, kind of hang out there, and when I get more, and go farther, and when I get uncomfortable, hang out there and just feel it. And at first I was like, whoa, this is scary. Like I was
Yeah.
really definitely scared. You know, I would be like, get here and be like, actually in my home, it was good. But when I got to like the town, like the you know, in my town or like even bigger, it felt like, you know, but then when I started to actually practice it and do it, what I recognized was that I actually was super safe and even more safe, and that it was more safe than staying here.
Mm-hmm.
And that I could feel that everybody could be in existence where they are, and that I could feel all of it and also still be here.
Yeah.
So I felt more connected. I actually not felt, but feel more connected and more safe than I felt before.
Nice.
So
Good girl.
so I wanted to mention that, and though that's, you know, there's lots of tools. And I think that, that when, you know, when people see you and experience you, you can give them the tool that's perfect for them in the moment with whatever they're dealing with. And I've gotten that from you. And so I know that that's true. And I love that you were able to give like a full kind of big tool for everybody, you know? So thank you for that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the one thing I would speak to about that is I know you, and I know that you've been on your path and doing your work for quite a while. So the tool you're speaking of is kind of a mid-range to more advanced level tool. And so that can come, every individual can eventually get to that. When we're first starting out, though, we can open ourselves to things that then, you know, like me needing to go get help that one time when I opened myself up. And so just learning to manage our own system kind of at the core initially before we really start expanding out. But yes, I just wanted to speak to that too.
Yeah, I think that's important. And that's why I didn't want to hold it close to me. I wanted to express it, but also, yeah.
You go, girl. You're amazing.
Thank you. Okay, so there's another question that I really want to ask or speak to, because I think that one of the things that happened when I was reading the book is like one of the things for you that you experienced, is that not only did you see like, oh, these really great energies that were really beautiful and wonderful, but also the ones that were really dark and I would consider scary. And when I was reading, I felt like this kind of constriction and contraction when I was reading that made me feel like, oh, I don't want to open myself up to anything because I don't want to see anything scary. And so I just think that this is a really important, something really important to speak to, because I feel like maybe a lot of people might feel that way. Like, I don't want to open myself up because I don't want to see or feel or hear the so-called bad things. And so I wondered how you feel about that after being able to see so much. So it's not like you just saw the good stuff, you know?
No.
Yeah. So I
We're
wonder,
not given a choice necessarily on what we see, and I love that you're speaking to this. So we can take it on the meta level and talk about duality and the light and the dark, and how both have to exist for us to have this human paradigm and experience, right? And the highest possible frequency has to be countered in this level of reality for us to have that. It's part of what the human design is in the third dimension reality. And then we are, most everybody likes the light. It feels good, looks good, yummy, yummy. You know, it's just as easy to open to and feel good. The darkness aspect, it's our ego, really. And then on top of our ego, our belief structures that we're taught through whatever modality or lineage that we're raised with, the darkness is bad, right? And so we're looking at coming from just because it doesn't feel good, and it is what it is. And so when I first started seeing these things, like, I thought that there was something wrong with me, that I was a bad person because I was seeing these things, not understanding, right, that that's actually a pretty elementary level of thinking. I think that it would be relatively normal for a kid who's seeing these kind of, you could say, demonic type of things, right? To not internalize that and be like, why am I seeing this? What does that say about me, kind of thing? And so that's part of what contributed to my high levels of toxic shame and erratic behavior over time. That being said, the more I became educated, I stopped looking at things in terms of a dogmatic approach or any type of good, bad, right, wrong. I started looking beyond ego and just breaking everything down as energy. Like, I just look at everything is just energy, right? And so while the ego wants to identify with one aspect being better than the other, in actuality, that's just an egoic projection. So when anymore, when I see something that's scary or dark or icky looking, it took a lot of time for me to come to this, a lot of trial and error, a lot of fear, like when I was interfacing with these things and not knowing how to be with them. But anymore, what I found is when I just like see it for what it is, which is just an energy, and kind of honor it for its presentation, because they come in a lot of like, I mean, they put on a song and dance, let me tell you. And so oftentimes I'll be like, wow, that is amazing. Like, look at, and without having fear anymore. But it took years and years of me interfacing and kind of like figuring out, because again, I had to let go of my religious upbringing and all of what I had been taught. I had to go beyond my own ego. I had to let go of, my desire to control. I had to get beyond all of that before then I was able to just be like, all right, you just are what you are, right? And so now that I'm non-reactive to it, I just can see it, and it'll appear around the person that I'm working with. It'll come with a message. It'll come with a meaning. It'll come with something, right? And it's a gift, honest, or it can be a gift. There can be a lot of wisdom in whatever that is.
It's like more just information for you.
Yeah, so it's all just energy. It's just information.
Yeah. You know what's cool, and what I thought about when you were speaking about that is is to bring that into the body and into feelings, because I think one of the things that is happening in the human experience when we're dealing with the body and feelings is that we don't want to feel the anger, and we don't want to feel the sadness, and we don't want to feel the, what's considered all those bad feelings. Mm-hmm. And it just speaks to also that just being information and not trying to push it away or make it go away or say no, but actually feeling it and seeing it as it is, just like when we're in the excitement and joy and like all of those things, that we can also feel it and see it as information for our own growth and change and human experience of doing what we are doing,
Yeah, totally.
Mm-hmm.
And really what I've noticed is there's a lot of people who like the title light worker. And if that resonates with them, then that's great for them. To me, I'm not as resonant with that, just in the way of, it seems a bit limiting to me, because I understand the spectrum aspect to duality. And we could say on a meta level that everything is light, right? Even because it's all a paradox, but without getting into the higher levels of these kinds of concepts and just kind of keeping it here, I think it's really when we're able to be with those parts of ourselves that are maybe less than savory, like jealousy or anger or vindictiveness. We all have these capacities within us. It's a matter of not necessarily acting on it, right? Because that's propagating that aspect of darkness, but just being with it without having to try to change or do anything to it to make it go away. Right. And what I found over time, this comes from my own personal journey and experience, really interfacing a lot of this stuff within myself. The more I was just like letting it be there without trying to exercise it away or eat it away or smoke it away or do drugs or whatever, and just let it be there, then it actually integrates into the grid. And then we actually have it at our capacity for our totality with our own energetic wholeness. So if we're denying any part of ourselves, then we're actually denying a part of
us, right, of our wholeness. Yeah.
And in a sense, our own power.
Yes. Oh my God. I love that. So good. Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. Let's talk about your book. Well, I'm going to show you down.
Hands.
Here it is.
There it is. It was a birthing.
It was a birthing. Oh my gosh. So how do you feel after writing your first book?
I feel great. And can I tell you, so I like to say there's no shadow left behind in that book. And as I was writing, it took me 2.5 years. There was a lot of things I did not want to put in there.
I imagine.
Yeah, it's just so raw for me. And at the same time, the catharsis, like I had to relive everything that is in there, pretty much my deepest, darkest shadow. And the reason, I think my intuition, because at one point I was literally like banging my head on the table next to my computer, like, no, I don't want to put this in. But my intuition was like, all of it, just put all of it in, And so I just kept listening to that and just like doing this purging, cleansing for myself. I just putting it all in and being as raw and as authentic and as real as possible. And I have to tell you, that is what people are resonating with, because it's giving them permission in their our deepest moments of despair or ick, right? They're like, oh my God, I'm not alone in this. You know, even if they didn't take it quite as far down as I did, it just is like, you know, to know that they're not alone, to know that they're okay, to know that like I went from really far gone to thriving in my own power, and that it is possible through my own personal accountability and willingness to own my stuff, you know? And so it's an example, I think, and I feel amazing.
That's so awesome. You know, it is such an example of that. And I think it is really important because it's not, I can't imagine that this story for you, your story of your life, was easy to put in here at all.
Nope.
Not at all. Like when you say, no, I'm not putting that in the book, I can see why you were like, no, you know, and I felt so proud of you, and felt so proud to know you, and just proud that you allowed me into your life.
Thank you.
I think the vulnerability is so courageous and so what we need as a society, to be able to say, hey, like, nobody's perfect, you know, and my life is my life and my journey is my journey, and it's not perfect, you know, and I just felt like that took a lot of courage.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And was so proud to just know you and be friends with you, and to be able to read your story. It just made me really happy.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I appreciate it. And I would encourage anybody to, if they have a story within them, we all have our story, right? Mm-hmm. But if something wanting to come forth, whether it's through writing or drawing or music or creation in whatever capacity, to go for it and just express yourself. Because to me, again, going back to the piece of we're all going to die. Mm-hmm. And so I think it was Rumi, right? Don't die with the song left in you, or the music. Like letting it out, you know, I had to overcome a lot of my own personal fear around being fully seen and fully transparent. And now it's like I'm being catapulted into the next level of not only my own awareness, but the ability to really help a lot of people that are right there and ready to step into their own power, you know?
Yeah.
And so, to me, it's like soul food, you know?
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah, that's cool. I love that. I think that's good for me to hear too. Really good.
Yeah, I see you.
I know you do. I get a little nervous. I'm like, I don't know, you know?
Right?
Yeah, totally. But I know. Okay, I have something fun to do with you.
Okay.
So, it's going to be fast. So this is all in what you prefer. So I'm going to give you two different choices, and then you tell me which one. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Do you prefer dreaming or being awake?
Awake.
The experience of life or death?
Oh, both.
I knew you were going to say both on that one. Clairvoyance or clairaudience?
Clairvoyance.
Pens or pencils?
Pens.
Color or white light?
Color.
Back bends or forward bends?
Back bends.
Forest or the beach?
Forest.
Pillows or blankets?
Pillows.
Yoga outside or inside?
Outside, girl. Always outside.
Paramedics or firefighters?
Paramedics, come on now. I don't know too many firefighters. Yeah.
Movement or meditation?
Movement. Movement is my meditation. So
yay. That's it. That's all.
That's fun. Yay.